Allora io volevo assolutamente ringraziare l'ASCP e il professor Holiday per tutto quello che ci hanno mandato. Abbiamo potuto salvare molte vite. Grazie ancora.
Mio figlio sente che io ho il coronavirus positivo e lui piange disperato, papà muore, papà muore.
Those families were really hopeless because they couldn't see their relative, their loved ones that just departed, just got away home.
Mi commuovo anche adesso, perché vedere la gente morire con una velocità incredibile è la cosa che ti fa più male.
C'è stato un collega chirurgo che quando mi ha vista in corridoio si è fermato all'improvviso e mi ha abbracciato e mi ha detto: che bello vederti qui. Siamo qui.
Io ho percepito una grande umanità, una grande attenzione da parte del personale, quasi a sostituirsi a quegli affetti che venivano meno, che mancavano, nonostante alcune situazioni fossero difficili.
Nessun dorma.
Tanti medici in pensione che sono ritornati in servizio, tanti giovani che si sono magari appena laureati hanno risposto al nostro appello.
Ma il mio mistero è chiuso in me, il nome mio nessun saprà, no, no, sol la tua bocca io dirò, quando la luce...
Letteralmente è stata una boccata di ossigeno ricevere le maschere per CPAP, perché hanno consentito di offrire la risorsa terapeutica a quei pazienti che ne avevano bisogno e che altrimenti ne sarebbero stati sprovvisti.
All'alba vincerò, vincerò.
an ordinary world somehow I have to find. As I try to make my way through the ordinary world, I will learn to survive. Passion or coincidence once prompted you to say, pride will tear us both apart. Pride crawls out the window, cross the rooftop, run away. Left us in the vacuum of our hearts. What is happening to us? Crazy something. Where is my friend when I need him most? Far away, but I won't cry for yesterday. There's an ordinary world, and now I have to find. Now I try to make my way through the ordinary world. I will learn to
Good morning. I'm Dr. Blair Holliday, the CEO of the American Society for Clinical Pathology. It is an honor to have you join us today and throughout this week for the ASCP virtual annual meeting. Thank you for joining and prepare yourself for an incredible time. Over the past 6 months, all of us has experienced turmoil, tragedy, uncertainty. Each of us have been facing demons around this pandemic that, quite honestly, each day shows a different shuffling deck of cards. But it's because of the heroic efforts of you, pathologists and medical laboratory professionals. You, the individuals, have actually stepped out in front and become the saving grace for patients to get tested at the right time, and because of you, to get the right test. And as we continue to navigate this journey, we want to remind you that it's because of patient advocates and champions that actually stand beside you, cheering you on, supporting the vicissitudes of your needs, and showing you that your job is actually appreciated ever more than it's ever been. So remember, this is a time of uncertainty, but it's also a time to reflect on why we do what we do and why pandemics can go away because of you. Today, we're going to have an incredible discussion. We've got two patient champions, two individuals who have lived through this particular pandemic, who were actually diagnosed very early in the curve of this pandemic, who fought illnesses, who became very ill, who quite honestly survived a lengthy battle with this illness, and they're going to share their stories. But they're also going to share testimony with us as to why what you do saved their lives. And what you're doing every day continues to transform the landscape of healthcare. We believe it's through the conduit between our practice and the patient champions themselves that this profession continues to soar ever more than before. And remember, as we listen to their words and we listen to their actions, don't forget that their appreciation is heartfelt and their work is critical because together we'll solve this pandemic. Let's start with Rita Wilson, singer, songwriter, actress, but now a patient advocate for the medical laboratory science profession. An individual who got out in front of this disease early when she was infected and endured a very long illness. Rita is going to share today the story, but Rita, I'd like for you to tell us how the laboratory has deepened your appreciation for what patient care actually means. Rita? So Rita, tell us a little bit about your journey. I'm interested in you sharing with us your experience as you contracted COVID-19 and obviously the difficulties you had, not just with your own personal health, you and your husband, but I'm interested as well as what the relationship was to the testing, the diagnostic piece, and more importantly, the journey that you had to endure as you went through this very early in the pandemic, obviously, back as early as March, and you were in Australia, clearly. So tell us a little bit more about how this started with you and what your experience was, particularly with testing.
Well, I was in Australia. I had gone down there to do a couple of concerts, and on the flight down, I was completely paranoid because we were hearing about COVID at that time. And so I was wiping down the seats, I was wiping down the bulkhead. Every time I went to the bathroom, I had my own sanitary wipes and gloves, and I couldn't have been more paranoid. And I went down, had rehearsal, was with my band, also wiping down everything. And when I did my show at the Sydney Opera House, there was a gentleman who was backstage, and he had just returned from Hong Kong. On Saturday night, I did the show, felt great. On Sunday, did a tour of the Sydney Harbor, which was gorgeous. And I started getting a little chilled that day, but it was a warm day, so I didn't quite know what was going on. And I'm not a nap taker. And after that cruise around the harbor, I said, I think I have to take a nap. So went to bed, got up, had dinner. The next morning I had to do early morning press. That afternoon, flew back to where we were staying in Australia and started feeling an achiness that I've never felt before. So I just thought, oh, I really didn't think anything other than maybe I just had caught a chill the day before. So that night I got even more achy. And the next day, Tom said, he was also not feeling well. Because he was getting ready to start a movie, they became a bit concerned. So they sent someone to the hotel where we were staying and tested us. Now, these were the infectious diseases doctors from the Gold Coast, which is where we were staying. They were amazing, by the way. And we'd heard a lot about the test, but I didn't really know what the test was like until you get that test. And I like to describe it as having a little bit of a sense of memory after that thing goes back into the back of what it feels like is your brain. That for about 2 hours afterwards, I kept thinking, is it still in there? I'm sure you guys have all had this test, right? And you're like, no, get it out. Anyway, because you're all lab and pathologists, I think you'd appreciate that Australia was early on in this already dealing with a bit of a crisis. So they were concerned, and we got our lab results back, I believe, the next morning. And they were positive, and we were shocked. We were completely shocked. Now, that being said, they were very conservative, and they wanted to hospitalize us. When we went to the hospital, my fever was increasing. Tom's fever was also increasing, but mine was worse. And I started experiencing symptoms like extreme chills that I've never had before. I know that everybody has different experiences with this, but this was uncontrollable. I don't know if any of you in the audience have had it, but it was, there was nothing I could do to stop this shaking. So they were concerned about that. They were concerned about the fever. They were doing our blood work so that we were making sure that there wasn't an effect on our lungs and organs. Had x-rays, which was important. And that continued for 3 days. But when my fevers started to drop, they said we could go home. And that's when it got worse. I had read that the worst symptoms can occur 5 to 8 days after onset of COVID-19. And that seemed to have been an accurate description of what I experienced, because then it became really bad. Now, I also had other symptoms that I wasn't expecting: extreme nausea, a lot of gastrointestinal issues, and I had vertigo. I've never experienced anything like that, and I don't know if other people also had that. And I just had to get through what that was. And I think that was just the virus working its way out, and was really happy when that was gone.
So Rita, early in the pandemic, you were a loud voice, a patient advocate, to talk about COVID-19. Most of us didn't really understand the symptoms and didn't understand the etiology even. More importantly, what was going to happen with respect to this future course of the pandemic. But you and your husband decided to come out early and talk about it and share your personal story with us and allow us a peek inside the inner sanctum of what it's like. Why did you choose to do that? What was the pervasive reason why you decided to come forward and teach us and share your story with the world?
I think it's almost a civic duty. We felt that if we could get it when we were being so extremely cautious, I wasn't shaking hands, I wasn't hugging anybody. We were trying to take, social distance as much as we could. And we felt that it was something that we wanted to communicate, like, you have to take this seriously. If we did everything that we could possibly do and we still got it, then you could get it too. And I think it was important to let people know that. I didn't realize it at the time, but I've been told afterwards that that was impactful, because it did communicate to people that this was not something you could mess around with.
So Rita, there's been a lot in the press about you and your husband and the potential use for convalescent plasma. I know that you're aware of the issues surrounding both the scientific community around convalescent plasma, but at the time, back in early March, there certainly wasn't any knowledge that we could share. And you and your husband decided to get out in front of this early. I know that you were unable to donate, and I'd like to hear why. And of course, I know that your husband did donate because there was a lot of national press around this. Why were the two of you very interested in this conversation? And what was it that you thought you would bring to the public good by the potential for sharing convalescent plasma for patients who are currently struggling with COVID-19?
As soon as we heard that donating plasma was possibly going to be helpful, we wanted to do that. Now, before you donate plasma, as I'm sure you all know, you have to go through testing to see if you are even going to be a good donor. And there was a multi-questionnaire that asked about our history. And what I thought was interesting was that there was a travel history in there. And one of the things it asked was, did you spend more than, I think, 3 months in the UK during a very specific time? I believe it was the 80s, sometime in the 80s. And I had gone to drama school over there. And I was not, in fact, able to donate plasma because of that information, which I believe, and you guys can correct me on this, had to do with maybe mad cow disease. And that still being, I don't know, a reason why they wouldn't want to donate plasma. However, Tom did donate plasma a few times, and we are working with the labs at UCLA and Dr. Otto Yang and Dr. Anne Ramoyne to be part of a study to see what results will actually be helpful down the line. We still get tested for antibodies, and we still donate blood. And believe it or not, we still have antibodies about 400 days out from infection. They've gone down, but we understand that that's normal. You can't have the high antibodies that you had when you were first fighting the disease. But we're so lucky that we still have them. And yet I still wear my mask, and I still try to set the example that wear a mask, because you don't know, one day those antibodies might cease to be helpful, and you don't want to be the person that's going to get COVID again. Like, how bad would that be? Yeah, I got it again. Not good.
No, that's definitely not what we want. And clearly,
No.
and we appreciate you walking us through the journey of your laboratory testing and how important laboratories were and the interface for your own health. And obviously the health of those that you're around, your own family, whether it be you and your husband, Tom, or whether it be, your siblings or your children, or even any of those who could potentially be affected. Because, as I like to say, folks sometimes argue about masks, but the mask will allow a small grandchild to hug their grandmother, right?
Exactly.
So it's
exactly.
important that we be proactive, and you are setting, a phenomenal verdict for us all to make sure that, in fact, as you walk the walk and talk the talk, as you walk through this navigating process through the laboratory, that patients have to see advocates, and they need to respect and look at advocates with a loud voice. So we want to thank you for that. Before, go ahead, please.
One of the things I wanted to say, though, is there is a part that pathology has played in my life that has been, I would say, life-saving. And that was when I was diagnosed with breast cancer. At first, I was told I didn't have breast cancer, that I had an underlying condition called lobular carcinoma in situ. And so because that puts you in a high-risk category for possible breast cancer, we were monitoring that. And monitoring that with MRI. And one year I had my breast MRI and it lit up, and they said, what's that? And we did a lumpectomy, we did a needle-guided biopsy, and they said it's inconclusive, so they wanted to do a lumpectomy, which they did. And the tissue came back as being pleomorphic lobular carcinoma in situ. So I asked my doctor at the time, well, are there margins on that? And he said, that's a good question. It was a strange answer to hear, because you hope that there's margins, or that it's containable in some way. So a girlfriend of mine who had breast cancer twice said, why don't you get a second opinion on your pathology? I had never heard of that. Everybody goes to a doctor for a second opinion, but I had never heard about getting a second opinion on your pathology. So there was a doctor in New York, now he's at UPenn, but his name is Dr. Ira Bleiweiss. And I sent my tissue to him, and he came back and he said, I'm sorry to tell you that you have breast cancer. We had even a second opinion on that opinion done at Sloan Kettering, and that also came back positive for breast cancer. So I'm thankful because I was able to find that breast cancer very early. I treated it with bilateral mastectomy, and I'm here today talking to you. But I really have a specific pathologist and the pathology department to thank for saving my life.
Well, isn't it true? And not to go into the science, but lobular carcinoma in situ is precancerous, but very difficult to diagnose, and does require, you know, multiple heads together to find to make sure that it has in fact invaded. And you, in fact, were one of those patients that we were able to save before it became metastatic. So congratulations,
Yes.
the lab did save your life, and we're very thankful that you are joining us today. Rita, we're going to pull Chris in for a minute, and then we're going to bring you back on. We're going to bring you back on for another Q&A for all of us together. And I want to verify with the producer real quick. We are prepared. So Rita, stand by, and we'll see you in a few more minutes, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Welcome to the ASCP show today. We thank you very much for joining us, and it's great to see your face.
All right, you can see me, you can hear me okay?
Perfectly, perfectly.
Thank you for the invitation, I appreciate it. I can't think of a better time to be having the conversation and frankly to be doing the work that you all are doing. So thanks to you and for those who are trying to give us an objective basis of assessment in a very subjective time.
Well, I like what you just said. Let's talk about objective, shall we? I think that's the critical conversation that needs to be had today within the public and obviously within leadership. And the important conversation, we can get that in a few minutes, but I'm really interested, and I want to go back and revisit a few of the conversations we had with Rita earlier. And we all watched you, Chris. I mean, we all saw you in your basement broadcasting, pushing through this condition, this disease. And obviously, I'm sure you had fear, just like Rita had fear, what it would mean, and individuals who might be affected, your family, your wife, or your child, your children. And please tell us a little bit about your experience in the basement.
First of all, I am in the basement right now. This is where I was shooting from then. Since then, CNN has set up a studio. At the risk of freaking out your tech people, I'll show you. We can always fix it. We're all a little flexible now, right? So this is where I did the show, right? You guys will remember these pictures on the wall, which I had to stare at too much. Then they set up this great new studio for me to do the show from here. And then they decided that it was, the transmission quality wasn't good enough. So I'm still in the basement. I come here very rarely because it is a spooky place for me. So that's where I'm coming to you from. And in terms of listening to your conversation with Rita, you were right, absolutely, to point out that it was an important moment for Tom and Rita to be forthcoming about what was going on with them. There's a lot of stigma with illness. I have noticed that myself. You know, we don't do well hearing when people are sick, and that maybe we'll get it. And, you know, there was controversy attached to whether or not it existed because we were dealing with a really absurdist notion at the time that this was a hoax. And then the fact that they got it in Australia and not in the United States, and that meant, well, it's still okay because they didn't get it here. I dismissed a lot of that, and really I just saw the value to society for them being forthcoming. And of course, as a family and certainly as a couple, they're known for that already. So I wasn't really surprised that they would put themselves out there for everybody else. And Rita is a survivor of cancer, and so she knows what a real fight is all about. Now, for me, it's unusual to be part of the story that you are covering. Even when we're in natural disasters or in theater of war, you know, you don't talk a lot about your personal experience. You talk about the people around you. You know, you are a lens for the audience to appreciate wherever you are. The decision here when I got sick was, well, so what do I do now? And the first suggestion was, well, get better and then come back. And I said, yeah, but I just told everybody we got to take this seriously and we can't hide from it. And now I'm going to like just pretend that I'm not on TV for however long this is. And so I decided I had to do it. It was hard to do it, to be honest with you. I was messed up, as you guys are well aware, because of the effects of the virus. I would have what I call a moderate case of the virus. It didn't put me in the hospital. I certainly wasn't asymptomatic. The chills that Rita was called, you guys, the clinicians, called rigors. I had rigors badly enough that I chipped one of my teeth. And in the TV business, teeth are very expensive. You don't want to go chipping them unnecessarily. And I lost 20 pounds. I'm a big dude. I walk around at like 225, but you know, I lost 20 pounds. I lost bone density. I lost a degree of mental acuity, not my knowledge base, not my ability to think as such, but brain fog. You know, to put it in a very non-clinical analogy, I felt on a regular basis like I was 2 drinks in. You know what I mean? Where like everything's a little foggy. Interestingly, I was thrown off enough by the experience and the effects, because it lasted 3 weeks. My big deal was fever. I had a 101 fever for almost 3 weeks. And I run cold, like 97 something. So this was a real tough thing, debilitating, appetite suppressing, disorienting, really depressing. And I'd never dealt with that before. I was one of those people when someone would, I have a lot of respect for mental health. I've done a lot of reporting on how we have to remove the stigma between body and mind and emotion in terms of illness. But even still, I now had fresh eyes on it. And when you say you're depressed, what's the natural reaction for people? Oh, I'm sorry, feel better. You shouldn't be depressed. You know, everything's going to be okay. I couldn't control how it was this, like the fever. It was like an emotional fever. And the biggest concern, of course, was, thank God it's me. You know, anybody out there who's a parent, you see a father, maybe a little bit more, but certainly a parent. Maybe not more. It's just my experience. I've never been a mom. But the idea of better me than Christina, better me than the kids. You know, let me take it. I deserve it if anybody does. But, you know, and then my wife got it, and she definitely got it taking care of me. Right. So now I was really in a depression about it. I almost went off TV after that happened. And I was like, I can't believe I screwed this up this way. Then my son got it, which was weird because he avoided me like the plague. Like even my dogs wouldn't come downstairs. One day, one dog came downstairs. And my 2 girls did not get it. So where did it leave us? It totally changed my life. I was just about to turn 50 and spending that much time in a fever, in a basement. And the basement's lovely. I got windows to the outside. It's not like I was in some kind of cell. But the idea of that much time, you go through your whole life. And I was afraid that I was going to lose the lung battle and that I was going to wind up in the hospital. And once I got in the hospital, who knows what's going to happen. So I did like a whole life re-eval. And that was also painful, but it was an important time. So it was absolutely life-changing for me as an experience. And something I learned during that time, and that we are still learning now, and that should be of crucial importance in terms of your resolve to do what you do. If we don't have an agreed upon set of data, we have nothing in any regard, let alone in epidemiology or dealing with pandemics. So the idea of being able to assess what is so rudimentary to you all is everything right now, because we saw that people would say, yeah, you know, the virus, it's not really that real. And what are they saying now in Florida, for example? Oh yeah, he or she died, but you know, they had kidney failure. It wasn't COVID. COVID was secondary. Now what are we learning? That the more objective basis of analysis, the more pathology, the more they're able to look at the blood, they don't even believe it's a lung attacking virus anymore. They believe it's a blood vessel attacking virus. And they're talking about nitric oxide and all these different elemental components that may help sustain a fight against the virus. Why do we know any of that? You, how will we really beat the virus? Well, time, of course, but testing, rapid testing, improvements in testing, understanding about testing, and what percentages of efficacy mean and accuracy mean, and why a test that's 60% that you can give every day may be better than a 99% test that you're only going to get to people every 10 days or so. So the work that you have done, which I'm sure you guys have always, labored as a secondary or tertiary component, the big shot is the doctor, the big shot is the politician who's talking about whatever findings we have, the findings you're coming up with. Now it's reversed, and we are wholly dependent on the ability of the clinician to provide data to get us through this morass of political spin about our realities. That's why I did this, by the way.
Right.
Right now, I'm getting a ton of offers to talk about being sick, which I am not inclined to do. In fact, this is the first of this type of conversation I've ever had, because I have so much respect for what you guys are doing, and you are a key aspect of our ability to come together and move forward.
Chris, we talked about this in the beginning, and I'm going to go back and focus on your words. Objective versus subjective, okay? And in terms, as you just said, in terms of the science leading the credible fight to eliminate this condition, eliminate this disease, as opposed to listening to the rhetoric or maybe even the political spin that might be out there. It is frustrating for scientists at times to know that there is an empirical, data-driven mechanism that allows for diseases to be fought and for pandemics to end. And importantly, if you think about it, there requires leadership. As you described, there's been an opportunity for you to support the national testing strategy, an opportunity for us to come together as scientists to work together around at least a strategy, a collated strategy that can be nationally disseminated instead of have one-offs between states, right? And that's a problem. Of course, you can see that, as you mentioned, between Florida and wherever it happens to be. New York got it right. I mean, New York had an opportunity to go into this and get it right, and because they were vigilant front. It was data-driven. It was empirically driven. It was an opportunity to talk about that. What do you think this fight would look like if it weren't for folks like Dr. Anthony Fauci out there talking the science talk and trying to convince the public to stay the course and let the scientists do what the scientists do?
It would be worse, to put it very mildly. What I don't like, everything you're saying is highly instructive and accurate, and a little bit preliminary, right? Because we have some big fights to win. Too many people in our country say science with quotes around it. And when you say scientists, it's like you guys are getting sucked into the political world now. Well, different scientists have different opinions. Yeah, but they don't have different data. You know what I mean? It's the data. If 8 out of 10 impresses you and doesn't impress me, okay. But we're both dealing with 8 out of 10. And why don't we have a national testing strategy? Well, we don't have one because that's all politics. It has nothing to do with you guys. If the president, if we didn't have Fauci, you'd have problems. We have problems with Fauci. Fauci's getting his ass kicked on a regular basis. Why? Because he's been politicized. What I think would be necessary is how do you allow people, how do we keep any aspect of our society exempt from straight political scrutiny? Where a death rate is a death rate. The amount of cases, we're doing better than anywhere in the world. Well, how so? Well, look at our death rate. Well, this is a percentage of what? Of your population, which is huge compared to a lot of the other countries that you're looking at, or by case. And if you want to be analytical, well, why are we keeping so many people alive? Because of people like you and the rest of our first responders who are so damn good at keeping people alive who would die in other countries and systems. See, so the data makes the analysis much more easy. Here's the biggest frustration for me, personal, professional. My kids The technical difficulties that I experienced this morning were in part operational, but also circumstantial. I got 3 kids sucking up my Wi-Fi right now. They're each doing their own Zooms, and I am sure abusing my no phone during school day rule, right? So I'm sure my son is playing Fortnite any chance he gets and uploading a ton of data, okay? My kids should not be home right now. They should be in school and be someone else's problem, not mine and my wife's on top of what we're doing. Why aren't they in school? Because we didn't allow you guys to do the job the way you can. We always say, kids, 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 we only care about the kids. We got to do the best for our kids. If not for us, for our kids. Look what we did for our kids. Nothing. We left it to each school district. Even the fancy ones like the one I'm in, where they get all this money, tax base and individual tuitions, they couldn't come up with enough tests to test kids on a regular basis. Why? Because we didn't rely on funding and pushing the people who do what you do so well to do it as well as you could for all of us. If we had taken testing and allowed you guys to do the work and given you the capital structure and given the companies that do what you do the output contracts to buy all that you could make, so there is no P&L issue, our kids would be in school right now because we would be able to count the cases and we'd come up with a simple logistical pattern of, the cohort or the pod or whatever you want to call it that you and I are in, we just got 2 positives. So now we got to test everybody with a blood serology test. They're going to be isolated, but everybody else moves on. Now we have to go off conjecture. That is the difference between science and nonsense. And the more we can embrace you guys and your work, the better off we'll be. I'm just so sorry that people in my position haven't done a good enough job at keeping you guys immune from politicization.
Well, first of all, let me just stop you there and remind you that you're wrong there. You are, in fact, out there in front talking about reality and having conversations and helping us showcase at least the importance of testing in the laboratory, and for that matter, any laboratory testing, to make sure that patients get treated early, as Rita had indicated earlier, and making sure that your kids can get back to school. Just like the college kids, where we have an issue in the colleges right now, and they're sending kids back home. We can be micro spreaders, right? So we certainly don't want that. We need to come up with a better formula, but one that drives through empirical science, data-driven opportunities. We're going to bring Rita back on to join you, Chris. Rita, can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, fantastic.
Hi,
okay, fantastic.
Hi,
you're my COVID cohort.
All right, Rita, sounds like your mic is working well now.
You guys have fixed the technical difficulties.
Okay.
I don't have to have my phone up to my ear anymore, so thank you.
All right. Well, again, thank you both for spending time with us today. I just have a couple of questions, and we're going to keep this brief before we sign off. But before you had gone through this journey, Chris, and Rita described it, and I want you to just give us a succinct answer on this one. Had you ever really had much of a relationship or understand what the unsung heroes of medicine were? And we're talking about medical laboratory professionals. Have you ever had an opportunity to spotlight behind the scenes workers such as us to help the American general population at least pass through maybe one of the most, let's say, perverse times in the history of our country? Had you had that opportunity?
Me or
yes,
Rita?
you.
I always assume it's Rita because she's more interesting. I personally, yes, because in dealing around the world with pandemics, at the end of the day, it's the ability to measure the effectuation of a prophylactic, some type of vaccine or a scientific understanding that leads towards something that is in any way approximating a cure. And then there's a secondary idea. Remember, I largely was in the crime business until our life became about our political structure, which some say is still the crime business. But so the reliance on forensic scientific analysis, DNA analysis alone, has changed the face of justice in the country. We now have a standard of saying it had to be you. This is your DNA. And it could not be Rita because her DNA is not there. Mine is. You know,
And I'm completely innocent.
Change the face of justice.
Rita, you are completely innocent. I'm going to pick up on what he just said because clearly most folks think about pathology, laboratory medicine as being forensic driven. That's an important part of what we do, but the DNA does trace back to providing opportunities for genetic testing, Rita, for therapeutic interventions, Rita, for personalized medicine, right? Such as you went through for your breast cancer. But I do want to talk a little bit about something that has been obviously on the forefronts of all of our minds recently, and that's the potential for not understanding the big picture around discrimination in this country and predominantly around this virus. Because we have seen that black and brown people have been disproportionately affected by this virus, Rita. And we've seen that these individuals, unfortunately, have not had the same opportunities. And these are difficult times to live in because we're trying to come to grasp with what's happening in the ecosystem, but we've got to do a better job. Rita, what's your opinion on what the United States can do to help at least showcase the disproportionate way this virus is affecting black and brown people in this country? What's your thoughts?
Well, the only way I can really answer that is through personal experience. And even though my parents were not black and brown, my dad was an immigrant and he came from Bulgaria and he was a bartender and he kept that job, which he liked and was good at, but I think he was better at things like building and he maybe wanted to have a restaurant. And he kept that job because of one thing and one thing only, and that was health insurance. And the health insurance that he got confined my parents to living a life that they couldn't really, if they wanted to try something else and take the risk, it would have meant losing health insurance for a family of 5. And I think when you look at people in our black and brown communities today, and maybe not just black and brown, but their health is affected more profoundly from COVID-19. We've read this, the science tells us this. I think the number one thing that we could do is have health care for everyone, every American citizen. And I think we'd be a more productive country if we did that. And that's my 2 cents, only because I experienced it with my parents growing up and my dad not taking the chances and the risks that he might have wanted to take because he was terrified that if he lost health insurance and something happened, we'd be broke.
And there are other populations in our country that are also terrified, that also are experiencing this same dilemma of being afraid to come forward because of the lack of health care and maybe even being deported. So we need to be conscious of the fact that what you're describing is still pervasive in our country, and we have to come to grips with it. We have to close up here, but I'm going to ask both of you to give me a 30-second response to this particular question. I'm going to start with you, Rita. We've been through a debilitating experience. You have lived through it. And even our economy has been grappling, but obviously I'm watching you smile. And watching you smile brings hope to me. I would like you to tell me what brings hope to you. What gives you hope?
I believe in the goodness of people. I really do. And I believe people are inherently good. And sometimes what we see on the media would have us believe the opposite. So what gives me hope is that I have been witness to the kindnesses of people all in my life. And I have a strong faith in God. I'm Greek Orthodox, and so I rely on my faith a lot. But I do believe that people will do the right thing, and there are a few people out there that maybe won't, but I think they're in the minority. So I believe that people are inherently good and they want to do the right thing, and they will.
Well, thank you for your optimism. And Chris, what brings hope to you? What gives you hope? And I want to see you smile, just like Rita smiled.
Well, I can't smile the way Rita does. That is a blessing that comes from her family and from what emanates from inside her. That was what makes her beautiful, right? The easy part is the outside. It's the inside that is hard. And I think that is probably the analogy for where I find the source of hope. One, I see nothing productive in not having hope. If you don't believe in yourself and your own goals and aims, there's never going to be a first step of any importance. And I think that this country is about struggle. Nothing has come easy in this country. No meaningful change, no meaningful development has come easy. We have a tendency in a culture of good times making weak people, where you forget struggle. You forget that things are hard, and that things of value in life that you achieve are hard. So the idea of hope for me transmutes into more of a practicality. If we want things to be the way we would like, then we're going to have to work. And that's the way it has always been in this country. Right now, we are at a low point. I have never lived through anything like this, brother, where we got a pandemic going here that you got to remind people about sometimes. Pandemic. You have people in the streets the way we haven't seen since the 60s. Since the 60s. And you have a political culture of complete rejection. People have had it. People see Donald Trump as a phenomenon. He isn't. He's a manifestation of long and profound frustration. Many of Trump's supporters support him despite how he is personally, not because of it. And that tells us we've got bigger challenges. So what is the hope? The hope is that this country has always found its way forward in its young existence through struggle. So struggle is not something to scare us away from the ultimate ambition. It is the process by which we attain it.
Well, thank you very much, both of you, for being advocates for our profession. Thank you for being advocates for the public good and using your voice appropriately to make sure that, in fact, patients do understand that there is a reason behind the science. There's a reason behind why we can eliminate this pandemic, because you came forward, you talked about it, you shared your story, and you continued to be a beacon of light for our profession. Thank you both very much, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Absolutely. Have a great day, folks.
Be well.
Bye.
Okay, well, thank you again for joining us here for the opening keynote for the ASCP 2020 annual meeting virtual. We are extremely excited about this week. Of course, September 9th through the 12th, and today being the 9th, we're having an opportunity to have yet another keynote. The next keynote is going to be Dr. Kang, who is going to be discussing wellness. And of course, as you heard from our future panelists, wellness is important, mental health is important, and your physical health is important during this time in crisis in our lives. We're all working 18 hours a day, but it's important to remember that your life is important to stay in front of your own conscience, because if not, you can't help the patients, as they've been talking about, as a byproduct of your great work. So again, thank you so much. We're looking forward to hearing Dr. Kang speak, and obviously, the most important thing is, as we work together through this week and as you enjoy this week, please do not hesitate to call upon us, ASCP, to serve as your advocates to support your needs for your profession. We are, in fact, stronger together. Have a great day, folks.